Good
Good morning,
morning.
Matthew David.
Hi, Martin. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thanks. How are
Here
you?
we are together with the community online. It's kind of a
Here-
wonderful thing.
It's wonderful. I think this is the first time since you have rejoined Grace that we've all been on the interwebs
It's
together.
true. I've been camping out with all the people here on YouTube who are all saying hello and chatting and communicating in the comments for this whole time, and now we're all here together. It feels really, it's heartwarming for me. I know it's chilly and cold for all of you in Oregon.
It's well, it's lovely to be in this context and to
Yeah, I'm
be
curious, Martin, today. I wanted to know, in light of these readings, in light of our current context, in light of really what's moving in your heart, what you might want to lead us in sort of reflection on today after hearing these readings and all this beautiful music.
Yeah, well, thank you, Matthew David. I'm thinking right off the bat that it's enormously fitting that 2021 is ending with us abruptly going off script. That feels like that feels very fitting, right? That
Right.
after the year or 2 years, as the case may be, that was not what we hoped for or planned that we're now doing a new thing. I think this is the time of year like when Dick Clark and Ed McMahon do the end of the year specials. I should
Are
probably
you are
figure
you Dick Clark or am I Dick Clark? Are you Ed
that's a
McMahon? Who am I?
that is a it depends who has the bigger
Post
laugh.
in the comments if you think that Martin is Dick Clark or Ed McMahon.
Yes, yeah, we'll see if we can do a poll to figure out who is. I should probably get a more contemporary
It's
pop culture
okay. I
reference.
think a lot of people here are understanding of that
Yeah,
reference.
I like whoever is currently holding.
Don't try to reach for one. Ami will
So
correct
yeah,
you.
no, that's a mistake. It's a
Yeah.
mistake to do that. Although Brandon Harvey has promised to get me up to speed on pop culture references, I'm counting on him to let me know for next year who actually hosts the New Year's celebration
Yeah.
now. So that feels really fitting to do that. And in a funny way, that's been a gift hiding in a often unwelcome time is this capacity to do a new thing, to improvise, to uh, trust that God gets praised, even
Mm.
if we are not in the building, and even if we can't do things, exactly as we've done in the past. I love the Anglican tradition. I love the Episcopal tradition. Sometimes I think a thing that is frustrating about this tradition is how committed we can be to past practice. And it's so a little gift hiding in a brutal couple of years has been out of necessity our parish's change tolerance has gone off the charts,
Yeah.
and that's just been a gift hiding out in this.
Well, and having been a part of the transition last year in a different church context when we all went online into these spaces and recognizing what could sometimes be really intense, almost existential anxiety that comes from things being different.
Hmm.
Now, this morning, snow came, email went out to Grace. Here we all are worshiping online. There was a bit of a hustle, I'll admit. But there was also this sense of like, yeah, we know that this is church. Like we know that we can do this together. And a sense of kind of comfort in where we've like how far we've come in
Hmm.
these last couple of years.
Yeah. Were you here by any chance when Sister Petra gave that sermon? I'm just guessing 15 months ago, but it might have been way longer than that.
I'm not
Time
sure.
is time has lost all meaning. She was talking about improv
Mm,
and how I don't know if anyone in this crowd has done improv. I was big into it in high school.
yes.
That the rule is you're not permitted to block in improv, and blocking is not as in football. It doesn't mean knocking anyone over, although it sort of does in a way actually, but it's not
Right.
physical. It means you can't you mustn't impede the direction that your improv partner is taking a scene.
Mm,
So if someone uh, says, knock knock knock, I want to buy some apples.
mm,
It's you're gonna wreck the scene if you say, but this isn't a grocery store, right?
mm.
You need to agree. And Sister Petra had this wonderful reflection on how improv is predicated on the words yes and.
Mhm.
So what we do is affirm and add to it, which I think in some ways is church at its best.
Yeah, and it makes me think of the readings that we heard today and this sense of this tradition, not just the Anglican tradition, but this long tradition that we have emerged from as Christians, where scripture almost ends up becoming this sort of commentary on the improv that God calls us into.
Mm.
Like there is this improv that we think we're doing, and there's this improv that God's doing, right? We're participating in the improv with God, where everything shifts and changes. And you hear it in the sort of the evolution from Hebrew scripture to Christian scripture, where even these early Christians, Jews themselves, looking back, going, well, what happened? What is this? And because how can we say yes and continue to move on with the way that God is continuing to speak? Sometimes we I think can make the mistake in the Christian tradition of thinking that, based on our readings of Christian scripture, that everything that happens New Testament forward is a correction, right? It's a correction to what wasn't right before. And I think that's a misreading. The idea of going like, oh no, the improv has continued in a way we did not expect. How do we say yes and to this? To
Yeah,
bring in
yeah,
Sister Petra's idea. Yeah.
yeah. Well, which is actually super Christ-like. I think actually every Christian ought to be issued one of those Bibles that's abundantly footnoted.
Yeah.
You get one, you're handed one when you go to seminary, but you often don't get one when you just plain old go to church. And what you realize when you're going through the gospel and you see its abundant footnotes is Jesus is constantly referring back to the Old Testament. He is constantly doing what a rap artist would call sampling. He's taking something out of Old Testament and affirming it, adding to it, arguing with it, which Jewish folks say is like this super Jewish thing
Yeah.
to do. And I think actually very helpful to us because it's very easy to slip into an anti-Semitic reading
Yeah.
of our tradition to realize that that Jesus is in Jewish community and doing something that's very coherent within that community, which is arguing about the text, arguing about the tradition with other people who also love it, as
Mhm.
opposed to like he's finally figured it out, and he is just what you said. He's setting people right who don't understand.
Well, and there's this invitation today, and we heard this if you were at the Christmas service yesterday morning, same gospel reading. In the beginning was the word. In the
Hmm.
beginning itself in John is this invitation to cultivate an understanding of Christ in the context of creation, in the context of all things, in the biggest of things, right? And it's an invitation both into this mystical meditation, but also a mashup, right? And perhaps something that could feel like, I wonder sometimes whether the reality of Jesus Christ in his own context and time had a bit of the same chaos that we experience when church gets canceled and we all are a sudden like, how do we do this now? How do we worship? What there is this sense of like you mentioned in your sermon Christmas Eve, holy chaos,
Mm.
through which we begin to discern God's movement in new and subtle ways. Like perhaps that's a part of what Christmas is inviting us into this year, especially, but in every year, is that like a kind of softening of our hearts to the chaos that God ends up being present in, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, God does come as a baby, and I don't know that there's a greater agent of chaos that can show up in your life
Preach.
than a baby. Like, oh my goodness. I remember those days vividly. The sleep deprivation and yeah,
Yeah.
it's a whole new life. The that continuity you're talking about. I mean, God in the beginning
Mm.
is I'm thinking about that in particular today. So many folks will have received the enormously sad news that Desmond Tutu has died. That was just announced this morning,
Mhm.
and living saint in many ways. He Tutu. Here's a little Episcopal trivia for you. At St. Gregory of Nyssa in San Francisco, there are these painted saints on the walls of the church. It's worth it if you're ever in the
The
Bay
ones
Area.
dancing.
They're all dancing.
Mhm.
They're all dancing. Tutu was the only one who was living at the
Mhm.
time that the church was painted, and therefore the only one who did not have a halo in the crowd. And
Oh,
it's to be presumed that they're going to be getting out the scaffolding
oh, that just stirred my heart. Oh, that's really
and
emotional.
and
Oh,
giving him his. It's to be presumed he's going to be getting his halo now.
wow.
Uh, One of the things, and there's so many reasons he was as beloved as he was, but one of them is I think he was plugged into that radical continuity
Mm,
that like God in the beginning, John sort of reprises the words from Genesis, right?
mhm.
Or reprises. I don't know how to say that word. It's one of the two.
Male
John,
surprise, surprise. Yeah.
echoes. John echoes that there is, this goodness from the very start,
Mm,
and I think in a lot of ways that's really worth remembering, and it's a really important corrective to some of the stuff Augustine talked about. Augustine's great in many ways, but Augustine is, significantly responsible for getting this notion of original sin into deep into Christian consciousness. This idea that there's this brokenness or stain that we all show up with. It's Augustine who says, "So small a baby, so great a sinner,"
mm.
um, which would be, like hilarious
Troublesome.
if it
Yeah.
weren't so mistaken.
Yeah.
And I think what John says and what Tutu understood is, rather than this original sin, there is this original blessing. There's
Mm,
this deep goodness
mm,
in creation. Facebook today is full of people who bumped into him at one point or another and said um, uh, that when I spoke to him, it was like I was the only person who existed.
mm,
I had the sense that I was this is not my own experience. I'm repeating someone else's.
mhm.
That I was the only person or the most important person in the world. And my guess is that he was seeing that original blessing. He was seeing the image of God. He was seeing folks' belovedness
Mm,
in them, and that empowered him to do. I mean, what a life!
mhm.
What a life! Oh my goodness!
Mm. I appreciate this reflection very much, and I'm inspired here. I think to invite all of those who are with us today, as you're hearing these words and these things that Martin and I have mused a bit on, and this news about Desmond Tutu, and this reflection on the original blessing, for the intercessions that will be coming soon in the service. I invite you to respond. This is a slightly different way of doing our intercessions today. To respond to this prompt, this question: where do you see the original blessing most manifest in your life? So, where do you, all of you who are participating in church through the screen, where do you see this original blessing that maybe John calls back to, that Desmond Tutu was so present with in his life, that we're called into reflection on today? Where do you see that most manifest in your life? And I invite you to reflect on that in these moments of silence that we'll be taking in a moment, and to post that in the comments, and then we'll read those aloud so that we can all participate in that meditation with you. Martin, thank you so much for these thoughts and reflections that you've offered us today.
Thank you, Matthew David.
So let's take a moment in silence.